I don't like lies. And I hate the lies told about Israel. And if you've covered any conflict there, you'll know that more than any other war zone, this is a war zone in which lies just go out everywhere, every day. People lie about the IDF. They lie about what the Israelis have suffered as well as what they do.
But there's a recent poll of young Americans, and an astonishingly high number identify with Hamas. This is not a survey of Harvard undergrads. It's young Americans getting their information from TikTok and Hassan Piker on Twitch and who knows what else. So I do think that that is real, and the kind of inoculation perhaps that was granted to a generation above us that, you know, I guess the Shoah inadvertently provided, that inoculation is gone. It's gone.
I think it's not just that that has gone. I think that there's something very important psychologically, which if I can say so, which I identify in the book, which is in the book before this, The War in the West, I talked at some length about the anti-Americanism and anti-Westernism that existed in America in particular. And what I said there was that there was a very dangerous thing being set up in the United States and in other Western countries, which was that young people born in the 21st century were being told that they were guilty of things that they could not possibly, conceivably be said to have guilt for. You are guilty if you are born in America in the 21st century of slavery, genocide, ethnic cleansing, white supremacy, and so on. These are all charges you can take on their own, and they have more and less legitimacy wherever you want to look in the American past, as in any country's past. But to say to people, you are guilty, with no form of alleviation of the guilt, was, as I said in The War in the West, an extremely dangerous trap to put people into. Now, as I see it, much of the reaction of the student groups and so on, first of all, it's all imported in one way or another.
Well, the ideas are Soviet.
There's that. There's also the fact that honor our martyrs. Come on. This is imported crap. This is Qatari-funded, Qatari-influenced, Iranian-influenced import ideology. This is not a generic ideology that happened to crop up at Yale.
But I want to push back on that because I do think that's a little bit of a cope. Like, we have a huge story in the Free Press today about the $29 billion from foreign governments, including Qatar and China, that have flowed into elite universities. If you're looking to invest and pour fuel on a fire of anti-Americanism, you can do no better than the Ivy League. But let's not delude ourselves into thinking that...
I'm by no means pretending that that's the only cause. I'm saying that once something is pushed like this, once a kerosene like this is pushed by a foreign power into a highly receptive environment, something happens. And I'll just quickly explain what it is that's happening. What they're doing is what a psychologist would call projection. They are accusing the state of Israel of all of the things that they have been taught that they themselves are guilty of. They have been told that by dint of being in America in the 21st century, you are on stolen land. What do you do about it? Do any of the kids or their professors in question want to hand over the ground of UCLA to a tribe that has died out? And they don't. They could. They don't. But what can you do, I wonder? It turns out that you can accuse the one Jewish state in the world of all of the crimes that you have been told you are guilty of by dint of being born in the West. Why does this stuff work so well in specific countries? Works so well in America, so well in Australia, so well in Canada, so well in Britain, in the Anglosphere, effectively. Because all of these countries have been prepared for this in recent years. They have all been prepared, knowingly or otherwise, for just such a moment of scapegoatism. Just such a moment where you can say all of my sins, all of the things that I've been, like the Scientologists, you know, with the particles they believe that you get from some
This is how they go. This is how you go clear.
This is how you go clear. This is how you decide your student days will be best spent hollering against the state of Israel because you can accuse them of all the things you've been told you're guilty of. This is projection on a massive scale, but the evil that it reveals is extraordinary. I give an example in the book of many examples, but one of the ones that really shattered me was when the Nova Party, which as people will know was one of the targets that Hamas came upon that morning, October the 7th, 2023. When the Nova Party was memorialized, it was an exhibition you probably saw. I saw it in Tel Aviv, when it started, but it was a memorial exhibition and a sort of recreation of, what happened, testimony. And the exhibition traveled to Los Angeles and also here to New York, not far from where we're sitting at the moment. And when this exhibition opened, it was greeted by hundreds of protesters who, some of whom on the way, you'll remember, covered their faces in kafirs and COVID masks because, as I can never resist saying, these people are simultaneously hot for intifada and fearful of the COVID-19 virus, wildly worried about the I'm sure we can agree. But these cowards, the new KKK, they cover their faces just like this. They're cowards. These people are on the New York subway chanting, asking for any Zionists to identify themselves and get off the train. They get to the center of New York and they go to the Nova exhibition and they stand outside and they chant support for Hamas, support for intifada, support for the murder of people at the Nova Party, claim that the Nova Party itself was guilty and a legitimate target. One of the men walking through the street of New York that day to the exhibition was a father who lost his daughters at the party. He had to walk in New York past a crowd of hundreds of people with a stage and megaphones celebrating the murder of his children. What level of evil do you have to have fallen into that you would think that you would stand outside a memorial to the young people killed at that party and say that the young people dancing in the early hours were guilty and deserved the slaughter and the rape and the murder and the beheading and the kidnapping? This is not a problem for Israel. And I've said this since October the 8th. This is not a problem for Israel. Israel has an army, and it has a civilian army, and it has the right to make its own decisions about how it protects itself. But this is a profound problem for America and the rest of the West, that we have people in our midst who glorify in the death cults, who find it easy to decide. Some people find it difficult to decide whether they're on the side of Israel or Hamas. I don't. I know which side I'm on. I know which side I want to thrive and to win. And I know which side I want to be over, in order that the Israelis can live in peace and the Palestinians can live in peace. Hamas is a disaster for Israel, but it's an even bigger disaster for the Palestinians. But that aside, why do so many people find it so easy to be on the side of the death cult of Hamas? And why do so many of them, not sure which side I'm on here, same people who said for years believe all women, they don't believe Israeli women when they're raped. They simultaneously deny that women were raped on the 7th of October and claim that the IDF, when they go into Gaza, can't help but rape women. Once again, projection. You claim that Israel is doing things your own side is doing. They accuse the Israelis of being baby killers.
I see everything
They support the baby killers. They literally love the baby killers.
But how is it simply that people, that evil is real?
Yes.
And that evil, of course, evil's real.
Yes.
But give us your best explanation of the unexplainable. How can it be that so many people who've been educated at the most storied institutions in American life are falling prey to this? And maybe put another way, and you write about this in the book, and as I read it, I'm like, wow, I can't believe I didn't think about it this way. There's been so many protests since October 7th, 2023, and what you write about and point out is that there was no mass protest in this country against Hamas.
No.
Now, I'm an optimist. I believe that the vast majority of ordinary Americans understand which side is overwhelmingly on the side of good and which is on the side of evil in this conflict. But explain that to us. How have the most vocal, passionate people been on the side of evil? And where are the voices in this country and perhaps in the West more broadly on the side of the good?
Well, there are a lot of people on the side of the good, a lot of good people with a voice and some without, many without. I have no instinctive sort of optimism or sort of Panglossianism, nor pessimism or depression about any of this. I simply look at the situation as it is. I would just say that there are a couple of historical examples I give in the book, which I'm really, really keen that people absorb, which are relatively little known. But the aim of them, from previous outbursts of anti-Israelism, anti-Semitism, anti-Jewishness, and so on. One of the things I'm very keen to point out in a couple of the stories and anecdotes I tell, historical comparisons I make, is to enliven people to recognize the idea that Sometimes you can become precisely the thing you meant not to become. Sometimes in the name, everybody used to know this. Sometimes in order to do the worst evil, you have to think you're doing the greatest good. Sometimes you'll find yourself thinking, for instance, I'm an anti-Nazi. I'm an anti-Nazi. I'm sure I'm an anti-Nazi. I've always been anti-Nazi. I don't like the people. And then you're on the side of Hamas because of reasons I give in the book. The truth is, as I say at one point in the book, that our age is very loath to use the theological language of evil. But it's become my certain belief in the last couple of years that we have to be able to use this term because some things deserve it. And the actions of Hamas absolutely deserve it. Not just their treatment of the Israelis on October the 7th and since, and their treatment of the kidnappees, but the treatment of people in their own society they claim to govern. If evil exists as a force in the world, as I believe it does, then it must be countered judiciously, carefully, always, as I believe I've seen with the IDF, always in the knowledge that what you are doing must be in defense of a society and not motivated by a hatred. But it must be comprehensively destroyed. And I have little truck with people who say that Hamas alone of all human ideologies is indestructible. Without needing to cite the Nazis, I would just say, look at the cult of the emperor in Japan up until 1945. We thought it could never be destroyed. It was far more powerful than Hamas. Far more powerful. And this country, America, which so many people on the left and now on the right want to disparage, did no good in the world. This country, America, among its many great achievements, saw off the death cult of the Japanese emperor by military defeat and by moral victory. And if America could do that, then it can do it again now. I also think back to when I knew absolutely nothing about all this, when I was a student at Oxford. I haven't said this before, but I remember once getting into a late night discussion with some contemporaries. The second Intifada was going on. I knew nothing about it, but I was horrified, as everybody was, by seeing the killing and the deaths on the pages. I think the Jenin massacre had just been claimed to have occurred, or maybe that was sometime later. And all the papers and the BBC and everything else in the UK was filled with anti-Israel stuff. And I suppose I was, as worried as anyone else. There seems to be killing going on, and I'm intelligent enough, I'm grown up enough to know killing is bad, but I'm not yet intelligent enough to know that that's not enough. And I remember a fellow student who was younger than me, who happened to be Jewish, who was very angry with the discussion as it was going, informing us of what was actually happening and what the Intifada meant and what it meant to people like him to see the buses blowing up and so on. And I wasn't yet dogmatic enough, but we talked about it and he helped change my mind. And I think it's worth saying that because everybody has a voice and you can use it judiciously.
You are not Jewish yourself. You're not a foreign correspondent with a particular newspaper. You write for a lot of places, including Happily Us. And yet I think you have done more to cover the war since October 7th. And I certainly know that you have done more to expose the irrational hatred of Jews and of the Jewish state and really of the West than anyone else that's alive right now. Talk to me a little bit as maybe a way to close about why you've prioritized this story. I'd love for you to explain why this story has so captured you, why you have been so tireless and passionate in exposing it and in telling it.
It's a lot of things. One is, as I've said to you before, I don't like lies. And I hate the lies told about Israel. And if you've covered any conflict there, you'll know that more than any other war zone, this is a war zone in which lies just go out everywhere, every day. People lie about the IDF. They lie about what the Israelis have suffered as well as what they do. So that gets me on an intellectual level. There's obviously emotional levels, some of which are probably too deep for me to go into. But one of them is, is I do think that on one level, the supporters of the death cults, the people who would use their energies calling for the overthrow of all Western civilization, but who zoom in, and by that, that's not an exaggeration, of course, that's literally what the Columbia student protesters asked for, the overthrow, the destruction of all Western civilization. So I'm not on board with that because I love the civilization I'm from and I want it to continue. But they think that the first target they can actually take out is Israel. That's their view. They think they can take out a country of 9 million people faster and more easily than you can take out a country of 340 million people or so. And they're probably right in that regard. They're probably right. If you try to overthrow the United States of America, hard. Want to crush and completely destroy United Kingdom? Not as hard. Could be done. People have tried before, but didn't work. Want to crush a state that's not yet 80 and has only 9 million people in it, in a very dangerous region, surrounded by people who want to annihilate the people of the country. These people see that as being achievable. Now, what is it other than that it's achievable? It was a fatal blow to all the rest of the West. The Western tradition, as you know, as your viewers know, is based on the legacy of the Bible and of Athens and Jerusalem. If you were to take Jerusalem out of the equation, you do absolutely cut off the tree of Western civilization, not on a branch, but at the root. The whole tree dies. I mention at one point in the book, as you know, the passage from Deuteronomy, choose life. Somebody said to me earlier today, but it's such an obvious edict. I said, no, it's not obvious. It wasn't obvious at the time of the prophets that people should choose life, any more than it was obvious at the time of the Ten Commandments that murder was bad. People murdering each other all over the place. But my point is that this target of the anti-Israel movement, the anti-Western movement, they believe Israel is the first thing they can get. I believe that in one way they are clever in their target selection. They are right. The Islamists believe that if they take out Jerusalem as the holy city of the Jewish faith, and indeed of the Christian faith, that they can win for their own religious cause. The anti-Semites around the world always seem to believe that if you get rid of the Jews, something magical happens in the world. If you attack the tradition of the Bible, you attack the Jewish people, you attack the Jewish state, you take out this root of Western civilization, and you contaminate everything, which is what always happens. Everyone knows anti-Semitism is a problem. For Jews, yes, but then every other horror comes out of the box. But here's the thing. The reason they've chosen it wrong is that, in my belief, Israel isn't going anywhere. It's not going anywhere. The famous thing that Golda Meir said to Joe Biden, we have a secret weapon, and he thought that she was going to tell him that they had the atomic bomb. What is the secret weapon? We have nowhere else to go. The great realization of Herzl and the visionaries of the 19th century, Jabotinsky and the rest, the great realization that has been resolved is the Jewish people must defend the Jewish people with any friends they have, hopefully with many, but the Jewish people will defend the Jewish people in the Jewish homeland. And they will not give it up. And they, to quote the psalmist, I shall not die, I shall live. And in the face of the people who are calling for the murder and destruction of the Jewish people, my belief is they have chosen wrong, because the Jewish people and their friends will continue to say, I shall not die, but I shall live.